Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about Abhorsen by Garth Nix. Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Speaking of jingle jingle, we are now back in Bell World.
Yes,
world where
Bell
there's
magic
bells.
time.
Bells, yes. The third
The coolest
book.
magic system ever.
It's so good.
If you haven't listened to our episodes on Sabriel and Lirael, go find. I think it's episode 6 and 9. I want to say something like that.
It's around there, yeah.
Yeah, something around there. But just go through the back catalogue and find it. Or you can go on the website and find it because I've now added a search by genre function. That's what I spent my morning
Amazing.
doing.
Fancy.
Do we want to give a brief introduction to main characters and reminder of the magic system? Probably a good place to start.
Okay, so on the side of the angels, does this world have angels? On the side of the charter, we have Lirael, our former librarian turned remembrancer and Abhorsen in waiting. Sameth, Prince of the Old Kingdom and Wall Maker, heir of the Wall Makers.
And General Good Lad.
General Good
Nice-
Lad,
nice boy.
doing his
Bean.
best.
He's a good bean.
We have a talking cat who is extremely mean, and we love him.
Yes.
We have a talking dog who is less mean but still extremely fun. On the side of the evil, we have an undead necromancer by the name of Hedge who's dug up an enormous evil orb that he is now pondering. Local death wizard ponders orb, thousands dead.
Well, it's two halves of an orb that
Yes,
you should
yes,
never
yes.
ever bring together. A bit like, for example, the demon core. There is definitely no analogies to radioactivity going on in this book or anything.
And he has on his side a spooky ghost who used to be a necromancer who is also just kind of watching him to fail, called Claw of the Mask. I really love in this book how much she's just sitting there like, this is going to end badly for you and I'm going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like every time Hedge tells her to do something, she's like, well, I will, but like it is going to backfire on you and cause you to like be torn to shreds and I'm going to enjoy it. And then sort of in the middle, we have Nick, who is a friend of Sameth from Ancelstia, who has kind of gotten accidentally possessed by a sliver of the evil orb and is thus helping to like bring about the doom of the entire world.
Yeah.
As you do,
Yeah.
cash-like.
And then you've got, I guess, the two types of magic systems, charter magic and free magic.
And like again, we have like charter magic as kind of like this framework that's been built on top of free magic to make it not impossible to
Corrosive
use
and dangerous,
harmful
yeah.
to use.
Friendly.
And it took lots of effort and some people kind of becoming not people anymore in order for this framework to be built.
Yeah.
And we basically get to see a bit of like what happened way back when that
Which is
we
very
get to
cool.
see sort of
Origin
a rerun
story
of some of that history.
time.
Yeah. And if you're wondering with the bell mention, the Abhorsen, I keep adding a D in it. It's not got a D in it. It's Abhorsen. It's got. Anyway, I apologise. Anyway,
It's an awkward made-up word.
they have a bandolier of bells, and the bells can basically send dead souls back to various gates of death. So they're running around like some sort of.
A white hat hacker for necromancy?
It's like battle music.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is another, like, one of the things that's fun about charter magic is that you can say it, draw it, sing it, you can play it on musical instruments. It's badass.
Good. It's good.
But also each of these 7 bells, they represent an entity that either used to exist or still does exist. So, like, for example, you have, later on in this book, we meet Astariel, or what's left of her, which is the biggest, most serious bell, and sort of various things. Like, each of those bells sort of represents the sort of remaining will of some extremely powerful people that were around at like the beginning of everything.
Yeah. And also, side note, we are going to spoil this book. So if you haven't read this book and you're like, oh, I like the premise of this, pause, go read the book.
And then go listen to other episodes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then,
share them with your friends.
Yeah. And don't forget to like, subscribe and retweet.
Yeah.
Smash that like button.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, these books are so worth reading.
They're so
there's a reason
good.
we've done all 3 of them this like in only however many episodes we've done.
Yeah. Shall we start with our terrible summary of this book?
I mean, I kind of threw it in already with the local death wizard ponders orb kills thousands.
Yeah.
I do think this is probably one of the books which has an accurate depiction of like a cat personality and a dog personality.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's just so, it's very on point.
Speaking of cat personality, a side note, I really love the moment. So the cat's called Mogget. The Mogget gets lost briefly at the start of the novel and then comes back to them. And they have this like, oh, is it really Mogget? It could be any powerful free magic being. What if it eats me? And then it just roasts Sam. Just reads him for filth for 5 minutes in this like really disdainful way, and Sam's like, nope, that's Mogget.
No need to worry. Good. This is my boy.
Defo Mogget.
I love it.
I did like your other one, Em, which was how to make a world-saving sword in under 5 minutes using only you have in your pockets. that did make me laugh when I read that on the notes. It's so true.
Yeah, it's badass as like.
It kind of reminds me of that, like is it the last Pirates of the Caribbean movie where they're like, oh, the 9 pieces of 8 is just like random we had in our pockets.
Yeah.
It's a good fun. It's a good time.
Or in Anansi Boys, when the witches are doing this ritual and they're just like, oh, we can substitute in these herbs for like these mixed Italian herbs that I've got.
Yes, that's so true.
Like a good magic system should be able to handle that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the start of the book is where Lirael left off. So unlike Sabriel to Lirael, where there is a time jump, Lirael to this is like basically straight off the bat. And
I think there was supposed to be one book, right? And I think like Garth Nix editor was just like, you got to chop this in half, because it's just too long. And they are long on their own. As one big book together, it would be a doorstopper. But that's kind of why, is that like Lirael Abhorsen is kind of just one book.
Although I tell you what, I think they, on a reread, when I read this when I was younger, I was less fond of Abhorsen, and I think I was kind of like, it's not that great. Blah, 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 blah. Having reread it, I'm like, you know what? Firstly, I think they do belong in two halves. I think that works really well. And secondly, Abhorsen is a much better book than I remember.
Yeah.
It's mostly, it feels very similar to Lirael. The vibes are really similar until they get to the Red Lake, and then it starts being this like
the finale.
Nauseous, sweaty, like everything's
everybody has radiation sickness.
And everybody has radiation sickness, and like the vibes just turn very apocalypse, end of the world, whatever.
Yeah.
Like you feel like the sky should be red for like the last third of this book.
Yeah. And I think it does go red eventually, but there's like in the last day of the world kind of situation.
Yeah. I definitely think it was because it's slightly different structure to Lirael, where you had like 2 points of view. You had Sameth's point of view and Lirael's point of view, and in this book it's one plot. Lirael and Sameth plus Dog plus Mogget are together for most of it, which I don't know. I didn't know.
But then you also get Nick as well, and bits of Sabriel and Touchstone as well.
It was one of the things I was trying to remember when I had to go and reference was like who Nick was. I forgot who Nick was. Between us doing our last episode and this one, I was just like, who the hell is Nick? I'm going to have to go and Google this.
You know when you get roped into just helping some like weird necromancer to destroy the world, just like on your summer holiday, right?
Yeah.
You propose a research project for your academia, and it turns out that you're just contributing to the end of the world, like that relatable feeling. That's who Nick is.
Babe, he's on his gap year. He's on his gap year.
I mean, it is a bit of a mood though that his only source of funding is like the necromancer. That's how he's got his funding for the big science project. Like,
it's like you sell your soul to Amazon, except it's this necromancer.
Yeah, it's like literally selling your soul to get the funding for your science project, which is basically what Nick's done. He has.
Like, who among us did not consider that for our postgraduate degree?
Yeah, it's like
joke's on you. I noped out of academia after getting my bachelor's.
I have completed degree bingo almost. I always wanted a BSc because then it's bronze swimming certificate, but anyway, that's a side note. That's just a casual Red Dwarf reference in there.
I mean, I just want a PhD so I can just be like, damn it, Jim, I'm a not a doctor. Damn it, Jim, I'm a medievalist, not a doctor. I want to be able to respond to everything with that.
Yeah.
Also the gender neutral title.
Yes, that is a benefit.
Yeah.
Where were we going with this?
I think we were talking about Nick's science experiment, but
yes, a terrible.
Also,
funding.
he is such he does such bad science. Like obviously he's helping to bring about the end of the world, but also I'm like, where are you writing any of this down? What's your control?
Yeah, this is just around. It's only science if you write it down.
Exactly.
Although, to be fair to him,
he is insane.
Yes, okay, that too. But any paper he brought from Ancelsier did just rot on arrival. So,
That's fair.
he's down on writing materials. He's got to learn to write with a quill. That's hard.
Yeah, you can only north of the wall. You can only write on vellum.
Yeah.
Yes. Here is my herd of.
I think if you handmade the paper, it would be okay. I think it's specifically things that are made by machines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, once you go north of the wall, the spirit of Luddism overtakes everything.
All his clothes fell apart as well. There's a side note where he's like, all my I don't have any underwear anymore because all of it just rotted.
I love the idea. So for a bit of real life flavour, I am currently knitting as we speak the most hideous jumper that will ever have existed.
It's delightful.
Right? It's a test run for me to learn how to make jumpers essentially. But I love the idea that his fancy suits that were made with sewing machines or whatever would fall apart, but my hideous jumper, because it's handmade, would stand up outside the north of the wall.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the key. I guess one of the themes we come back to in this book is because in Sabriel it sets up the difference between the south of the wall where there isn't any magic and north of the wall where there is the magic, and then the fact that it doesn't work either side. And then in Lirael, we go and see the Clare. So,
as far as north as you can get.
As far as north,
in
the glacier, Lirael's a librarian, but turns out she's a remembrancer, not a Clare. And then in this book,
she is also a Clare. She just doesn't have the sight.
Oh yeah, she is a Clare, but she doesn't have the sight. And then in this book, it's that there's two things going on. Firstly, you've got this northwards movement of refugees, basically that. Hedge, the big bad guy, has sort of set up to try and effectively get souls so he can create dead soul,
servants,
evil people.
Mm-hmm. He needs bodies to become his undead servants.
Yeah.
We were talking about this in the context of the Untamed, actually. If you are a necromancer, the really bad thing that you always end up being tempted to do is to kill people in order to have bodies. It's not so much if there is an existing body, reanimating them is bad, but not as bad as killing someone to create the body in the first place. Anyway.
Yeah. And that's what Hedge is setting up, yeah.
I think they play with, the book of The Untamed as well, plays with the same kind of horror of seeing somebody you knew, and maybe were friendly with, alive a couple of hours ago, and then them, an undead, trying to kill you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a very common, zombie horror thing, I think.
Yeah. And I think the book does that really well, because, again, this is young adult fiction. I mean, I don't know when you guys read this. I read it, I do remember getting a hardback copy that is somewhere in the loft, hiding away. And so when was this book published? It was, let me Google.
I've got it next to me.
I think it's 2003 and 2004.
Oh,
so
wow,
I would I definitely read this when I was 11.
This is nearly 20 years old. That's insane.
I know, but
Wild.
Now rereading it, same reaction when I reread Sabriel, going, who let the tiny child read this?
Yeah, there's some dark stuff
it's
in there.
really horrifying.
And so one of the things that we see in this book for the first time in the series is all 9 precincts of death.
Oh yeah, that's very cool.
I really, so we're gonna spoil this, I think now, but I really love what the 9th gate is. So you go through all these different ways that the river is trying to suck you under and whatever, and there's all really interesting ways that you're supposed to cross these precincts in order to get through without being taken by the river. And then the last gate is the river just kind of I think it sort of just dissipates into this big old lake, right? I kind of imagined it like, the salt flats in Bolivia, where when they get wet, they turn into a giant mirror. Yeah. And above you, in this sort of weird liminal sort of black sand desert space, are all of the stars. And if you look up at the stars and it's your time to die, or past your time to die if you're a necromancer, they'll call to you, and basically they will sort of call to you and say, do you want to be done? Do you want to go and sleep the long sleep? And if it's past your time, you probably won't be able to answer no. But if it's before your time, you might be able to answer yes anyway. And you see Lirael and the dog both have to answer that question. And that's how Hedge dies, is they trip him up so he has no choice but to look at the stars. It's so funny.
It's such a beautiful maneuver, because it is like, oh no, Lirael's been caught by Saraneth and she's got to kneel to Hedge, and she, or like she's kind of like that's it. He's got Dog, hasn't he? He gets Dog and makes her sit. Or like she's pretending to, because that's just who she is. And he's like circling around, and Lirael's like sort of circling around, so he's like gonna fall backwards over Dog. Yeah, basically.
the dog like walks round so that she trips Hedge up. And then he has to look at the stars, and because he's a necromancer who's very, very much overstayed his welcome, the stars go, yoink, having you. And he's gone. And
this bitch is soul empty. Yeet.
And it's this really interesting moment in the book, because by that point, things are so bad that, like, having killed this major antagonist, or having caused this major antagonist to have gone into death, right? Because I think he's technically been dead for a while. I'm not sure. Having done that, they're just like, okay, cool, done and dusted. Let's get back to, like, we've got other stuff to do. Like, there's no time to sort of reflect on it or celebrate on it. It's just like, okay, cool, that's done. We need to go back and fix all the other stuff that's going on. Which
I think plays very well into like how the whole narrative is structured. Because when I was thinking about a summary, I was like, you know what? There's not actually very much plot in this book.
It's one thing after another.
We desperately have to scramble to get to this place on time, and then we desperately have to scramble to get to another place on time, and we're always on the back foot. And like all of the sort of encounters are very like it feels very D&D. It's a mix of D&D and the Jason Mendoza school of problem solving. Like the number of times where they just like throw something massively overpowered at something, and Mogget's like, why the did you do that? Everybody's coming up. You know, it's like, it is like I've solved the problem in front of me, but straight away I had a different problem.
Another problem.
Something that's interesting about that is that, like, so for example, we've seen previously in this series that using master charter marks is like a serious business. Like, it takes a lot of skill to use them without like burning your own throat up and stuff. We see Sam just casually throwing them around because he's a wall maker and he's like really, really good at using the charter, essentially.
Like he uses 7 in one go, and it's just like, holy
Whereas Lirael, I think, used 1 at the beginning of Lirael and couldn't speak for like a week. And obviously she's
and she still had like a magic sword and like, you know, all the stuff that was supposed to make that as easy as it possibly could be, and still.
So it kind of makes sense that like these two people, and particularly Sam, are like running around using this insanely overpowered magic because that's just, they can. Why wouldn't they? It reminds me of, is it Survival as a Talent, where Harry just has this
he's just so powerful that it just
pool of magical power. So it just means that he gets to like coast past a lot of like using like a lot of the stuff that other people have to worry about, like, you know, conserving power or, you know,
or overstating your limits, or like very carefully measuring out how much power you're using so you don't overdo it or overpower the spell, or all of that. And they're just like, actually, I'm just going to whack it.
Like on that point, I think something I've really enjoyed about this book is because Sam and Lirael are both very powerful in their own right, but in different things. So, and it's kind of, they have to work together. They complement each other. And so it doesn't end up being sort of a boy wizard-esque where main kid plus the sidekick.
That are kind of redundant.
It's like, if they're not there, it doesn't matter. It's not like the chosen one must do a thing. Plus
it's
characters.
Like, I love the ending of this because it relies on, you know, if even one of the people who is there hadn't been there, it wouldn't have worked. Like, all of them are vital.
And it was a really nice thing to reread, because I couldn't remember when I first read it. There are bits of this book which I do remember, which I'll bring up later because they are massive spoilers. But I do remember one thing that was when Lirael goes into death to go through the 9 gates, and she's saying, you've got to protect me. And then you've got the scene of her going through. And then after that, you've got basically same time, Sam protecting her like icy body. And I remember that being such a, like, that is stuck in my memory from 20 years ago when I first read this book.
It's very evocative.
And 20 years later, I'm like, oh, I remember that thing.
Also, can we talk about that as like the culmination of their character arcs? Because like, so for Lirael, for me, it's that she looks into the 9th gate and says no, because when we meet her, she's suicidal. And like, for her at this point, for her to be looking into the stars of the 9th gate and actually be like, no, I don't want to go. I'm not ready. I'm not going to. You know, it's so important. And then Sam, on the outside, like, not in death. So the first thing, like, the sort of first traumatic encounter we have with Sam is him trying to save his school cricket team from Hedge and a bunch of dead. And, I mean, he does kind of succeed, but, like...
It's better that he was there than if he weren't, you know?
But, like, still a lot of people die, and...
He feels responsible and like a failure.
Yeah. And, like...
It traumatizes him.
Yeah, and it's with him for, like, there's a bunch of encounters later where he freezes, or... He's supposed to be doing Abhorsen in waiting things, and he just can't. And, like, but we get him defending Lirael from a bunch of dead while she's in death. And he's just got the panpipes, and he uses them, you know? He's finally got to a place where he's like, okay, it's not my job to be the Abhorsen in waiting, but I am the only person here that can do something meaningful against the dead. I'm the only one with the tools and any of the training. And I'm just going to, I'm going to stand my ground and do it. And that's so powerful.
You do the job that's in front of you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which is a massive theme of this trilogy. Like,
you know, it's not up to us to decide the time that's given to us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I also really liked it because it's kind of, in Lirael, they expect Sam to be the Abhorsen in waiting. And then it obviously turns out it isn't, it's Lirael. And it's kind of, you can't shoehorn somebody to be something that they're not. Like in the stereotypical chosen one arc. So for example, Wheel of Time, Rand is the Dragon Reborn. Sorry if you haven't seen the TV show. I think that's a bit of a spoiler, but anyway, if you've read the books, it's there. But anyway, and he has to grow into that role, and it's sort of forced upon him, and the rest of the characters have to go along with him being forced into that role and the consequences of that. Whereas in this book, it's kind of going, Sam was forced into the role. It doesn't suit him. He's not the right one, but he's actually better at this other thing. And I think it's quite nice in a fantasy book because a lot of the time it is chosen one, you're the chosen one, suck it up, deal with it.
Yeah. And instead it's like, actually, maybe the reason that this feels wrong is that it's not right for you, and that's okay. Yeah.
And that's something I really have an issue with a lot of these sort of narrative systems or these like magic systems where it's based on bloodline, or you know, you've got this sort of predestined identity, and it's like, well, what if it was wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, you know, specifically like coming at it from
not because we're massive gender queers out here.
Well, that's
what
I was going to say, like coming at it from a sort of the perspective of both somebody who is trans and somebody who converted to Judaism, like being able to have agency over what is right for you and where you're meant to be is like something that's really important to me. And like I'm not entirely happy with how it works in this particular series, but it's better than a lot.
Yeah, it's like your bloodline is rescuing you rather than your actual bloodline is rescuing you rather than you making a decision or I tell you what, I do think it's still a nice subversion of the refusal of the call in the hero's journey, that like if this was a traditional hero's journey for Sameth, the refusal of the call would be followed by the call won't leave you alone, and eventually you, like Lottie was saying, you just succumb and you have to do it regardless.
Yeah.
And for Sam, it's like I kind of tried to listen to the call, but I was very bad at it. And then I hung up the phone and called somebody else, and it was like another call got through, and that was better for me actually. So I stuck with that.
Yeah.
Which,
but like,
I did.
You're not required to do things that hurt you just because that's what you're supposed to do. I like that as a message.
And I tell you what, I think that plays very nicely against the theme of you do the job that's in front of you. The Susan Stowe-Hewitt thing of the problem with somebody saying somebody ought to do something is that nobody ever follows it up with that someone is me. And in this book, everybody follows it up with that someone is me. And that's something that we saw in Sabriel as well.
And it's the only reason the world continues to exist. Like that.
Yeah. It all matters. You know? Every person making the decision to like not run away and to do whatever it is within their meager power to like prevent this, all of that helps.
Yeah, whether it's like the guards that end up dying so that Sabriel and Touchstone can get away, or you know, the people at the wall, like everybody doing whatever they can.
Yeah, the guys at the lighthouse, it
all matters. Like none of it's in vain.
Yeah, I mean, even the Sutherlings being like, actually, we're not going to listen to this populist. You know, we're going to tear up this propaganda and we're going to listen to the people who look like they genuinely want to save our lives.
Yeah.
Like, it's so many people making, on the face of it, really small choices that all add up to.
It reminds me of a tweet I saw, I think earlier this week, which was, I forget the exact wording, but it was basically saying, like, you know, it can be really disheartening to see this giant web of awful stuff going on in the world around us, like all of the awfulness. But the good news is it's all interconnected. So if you are trying to unravel one small part of it, good, you're helping to unravel the whole damn cloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also very, no one is obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know about you guys. I mean, I definitely laughed a lot in this book, as well as the fact it's got lots and lots of details. It's so funny. It really there's so many points where you're like, lol, the giant owl.
Yeah.
Yes! This is what I mean about the Jason Mendoza problem solving. Yeah. It's like, how do we travel? Okay, what skills do we have? I can turn into a giant owl. I guess I could carry you?
Well, it's not even that, like, she's just like, I could turn into a owl. And then Sam is like, you could just very easily just, there's a size slider that I can unlock for you.
Yeah. And I love how, like, both Mogget and the dog are sitting there like, that's not easy. That's not
like,
easy, right?
Stretch.
That's like...
And so it's like, like, it's hard, Yeah.
That's another thing. Sorry, this isn't a humor thing, and we'll get back to it. But one of the things I really like about this book is that because it was supposed to be 2, and then it's supposed to be 1, and now it's 2, they have a recap at the start that's from Claw's perspective.
Claw of the Mask.
And she's sitting there like, oh man, I've got to be so, like, careful with these people because they're so dangerous. Not a single one of these people can be allowed to escape the house because if they do, they could completely ruin my master's plan. And you're like, okay. And then you're in their heads and it is just like one Molotov cocktail after another. And they're tired and they smell and they want a bath and they're just like, I hate everything. Why am I getting bitten by mosquitoes?
Hard cut to, like, the most exhausted people on planet Earth. Like, whatever the name of this world is.
Yeah, but, like, the further through you get, the clearer it becomes that they are hyper-competent, actually.
Yeah.
they don't realise it themselves. They're just winging it.
Yeah. But, like, what they have to compare themselves to is so warped. Like, Sam's parents are, like, the long-lost king of the North of the Wall and the one of the most competent Abhorsens that has ever existed. And Lirael has lived her entire life in a glacier full of, like, telepathic, clairvoyant people fighting weird library monsters. Like, none of them have any idea what normal is, so none of them realise how cool they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, but I think that's what makes it funny. Like, it's taking this serious that juxtaposition between Claw going, oh my god, these people very serious, scary, and then you go to them and they're like, YOLO, let's wing it. Winning it is the plan. That is the plan.
Literally winging it in the case of the giant owl.
Well, it's like the dog being like we get a reveal about who the dog is at the end of this book, and the whole kind of, it's been set up, I think, since, like, early in Lirael, but they're really laying it on that both she and Mogget are more than they seem, and we should be like, they're powerful.
We should be interested in that.
Yeah, they've been around forever, and, like, why do they know the things that they know, and all of this stuff.
Like, Mogget was around when Claw of the Mask was still alive,
Yeah. And, like, that's really interesting. But yeah, like, and so you have this, like, sense of these, like, these are these preternatural beings that are, like, beyond our ken, but also currently in extremely cute bodies. And, like, I forgot how many times the dog just straight up wipes out in this book.
Yeah.
Like, she just stacks it on multiple occasions and then pretends it didn't happen. And it's so funny. And, like, dogs do that. Dogs do that, cats do that. That is a...
Watching your pet be undignified and, like, unintentionally undignified is one of the great joys of life, I think.
Yeah.
I think this book conveys that.
Watching Wookiee sleep upside down, like, with her legs in the air and her tongue out.
It's same thing with the family dog. It's just kind of going, what are you doing? And it's just dirt face. But then also being very clever. Like, sometimes you think, is he going to understand to go and pick up the shoe that he put outside? It turns out he will. So I feel the dog is written so well.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things I love as well is okay, so I want to spoil a bit of the end of this book,
right?
Go
for it. We're like 30 minutes in now. I think we can do that. Yeah.
More spoilers.
Okay. Spoilers for who the dog and Mogget are, right?
Yes.
So we talked about the bells representing people, and basically what happened was there were these 9 bright shiners, these 9, like, entities right back at the beginning of the world, and they made the charter, and 7 of them put all of their energy into the magic that powers the bells now, right? and that's like Rana through to Astariel, these 7 people, and then 2 of them became the Charter, I think.
So no, it's 5 go all into the Charter. 2 are kind of mostly in the Charter, but then so Kibeth and Astariel are like they still have like consciousness outside of it.
Gotcha.
And then the last 2 are the one that ran away and the one that tried to blow up the world.
Oh, okay. So the last 2 did not go into making the Charter.
Yeah. They either ran away from the idea of the Charter because they didn't want to be subsumed in the case of the 8, or they were like, actually, this, why don't I eat the planet?
Yeah, and so the main antagonist, the big 2 halves of the glowing orb, imprison that 9th bright shiner who's called Uranus. And he is like, he's sort of like the like he wants to just destroy the world, basically. And it's not clear whether the world will be unmade or just reduced to a smoking wasteland, but badness, like no living thing will still exist. And then the 8th bright shiner is called Irael, who basically ran away way back in the day and was not part of... So the remaining 7 had to bind Uranus and imprison him, and then they imprisoned him in this orb and cut it in half and blah, blah, blah. And that's what's being undone by Hedge, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of this book, Uranus breaks free again. They do not manage to prevent him from breaking free, and they have to bind him again, except it's been so long, and they have representatives of each of the 7 members who bound him in the first place, but it's not enough because the blood's been diluted and blah, blah, blah. And the dog is Kibeth, so the dog is standing for herself in this ring of 7 people. But, they basically try and do the binding thing again, and he just laughs, like Uranus just laughs at them. And then Samuth frees Mogget, and says, choose well. And Mogget turns out to be that 8th bright shiner. And instead of, way back in the day, he ran away. He abstained, essentially. And this time he says, actually, no, I like this world. There's fish and there's people and there's rivers to play in and there's naps in the sun. And this is worth existing.
He has the small gods thing of he's been cat-shaped for so long that he likes cat things. He thinks cat thoughts now. He wants there to be fish and sunshine and to be rude to people.
A cat's enjoyment of the world makes the world continue existing in this book. Like, that's the culmination of this book, is that he enjoyed being a cat so much that he was willing to take a stand for it.
And you know what I think's really interesting? Because I wanted to talk a little bit about Mogget's arc in this book, because I think I didn't pick up on it very much, I think, when I was younger, and it's something that really interested me this time, is the kind of... So I think this book in particular is very aware that Mogget is a slave. Like, it has kind of come up, and I think it's partially why when Sabriel lets him loose and he tries to kill her in Sabriel, it's partially why she's kind of like, no hard feelings.
Yeah.
Because she's aware that, like, this is not... She's kind of got the this is the best of a bad situation kind of thing. I can't let you go forever because I like to live, but also it is unfair. I don't blame you for wanting to kill the thing the person that's keeping you imprisoned and obedient, Yeah. And I think this book is very, like... Because Kibeth, like, the dog doesn't get it. The dog is just like, I can talk down to you and be like, I can, you better behave. You better do what we say this time. You better pick the right side this time. But Lirael and Sam are both like, oh, hold on. This is a bit... Not that there's never like a conscious expression of, oh, this is a bit up. But they actually like start to be like, okay, Mogget, we need you to help, and in return I will get you fish, or, I'll bring you food. I'll bring you things that you like. I will,
They treat him like a person rather than a thing.
Yeah, like... I will, within the bounds of, I can't let the collar off because you will try and kill me, they are doing their best to be like, this is not, we can do this better.
They provide the things that he then says, this is why the world should still exist. Like, they're the source of that.
And they respect that he's, like, an entity that has a right to exist. Like, I think that's the thing that's, like, the contrast between the beginning and now, is that it's kind of implied that what the 7 wanted him to do was to also become part of the Charter. And, like, they don't exist anymore in any real way. And it's not wrong of him to want to exist as an individual entity. And I think this time he actually has the opportunity, right? This time binding Uranus or whatever, like, he's not going to get eaten by the Charter. He can exist. And, like, both Sam and Lirael are recognizing that he is an individual with the right to exist, unlike the 7.
Yes.
Which I think is just really interesting.
Well, he has a run-in with what's left of Astariel earlier in this book. And I think that probably... We don't get to see what they talk about, and it's not really clear who she is until later on. I don't think I even realised who she is meant to be until later on in this book. Basically, they have this sort of very eldritch encounter with Astariel, or who lives deep underneath Abhorsen's house, or exists, I suppose. And so she is one of the people who really doesn't really exist anymore. She's this sort of shade of her that exists outside the Charter now. She can't be part of it because she gave her life to create it. And basically, she kind of traps Mogget, and they have some kind of conversation, like something happens between them.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting that, like, if what he didn't want to happen is exactly what's happened to her. So I don't really have anything interesting to say other than I wish we could see that conversation. Yeah,
I like the resonance of it. I mean, I like that we don't see it because I think that means it's
very
like
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but like
interesting.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I like the him choosing life after having a conversation with the one that's the closest to being the embodiment of death. Yeah. Unrelatedly, this was a really cool world building detail that I liked with that encounter, was when they're in the caves where they meet Astariel, they're like, oh, they're looking at the walls, and it's almost like it's been cut by water. And they talk about how it doesn't, none of the way the water like patterns flow doesn't look like any river that they've ever seen. And it's sort of, the current seems to be running in two directions at one time and all of this. And you're sitting there going, it's death! It's death! It's the river of death! Supernatural river! And like, it's like a really subtle detail, but it's like so well done. It's a really spooky, well written encounter, and I love it.
Yeah.
Like, everything from the just, like, we have to breathe on these chains and pull apart these rose bushes and we'll find this dry well, that, like, all of it is just so well done.
Yeah. I think one thing, what happens with the dog at the end? The thing is, I read it and then, because the dog doesn't die, but, like, isn't, like, dead, but not dead, really.
Well, she's part of the Charter, so she can't ever really die, but this incarnation of her stops being.
Yeah.
So, like, the setup is that in order to bind Uranus, the person who does the final blow, like, plunges this really cool sword made out of that we had lying around into the orb, and that person dies, right? That person has to die in order for this to work. And what happens is Lirael is that person, and so she goes from being suicidal at the start of the first, but like start of Lirael, to having to self-destruct to save the world and really not wanting to. But what actually happens is that she has plunged this sword into the orb, and the dog bites her hand off, so that to stop the death from happening to her. And as a result, the dog kind of like absorbs all of that sort of narrative. The narrative, the pendulum swing hits the dog instead of Lirael.
Yeah.
And
it's so sad.
It's so damn sad. I cried like a baby, and I knew it was coming, and I cried like a baby.
I forgot, and then I reread it and went, oh my god, I'm having the same reaction like 20 years later when I first read this book, going,
it's good writing.
No. Like, it's kind of, because I remember she had a golden hand, and this is a complete side note, just mainly because me and my sibling had our little Lego like little cut, and we had one of them was Lirael because she had a little golden hand. And that is how I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that bit, but I just did not remember the dog.
There's also that moment where like the dog, so the death energy like makes her like old, and there's this really poignant description of this, like, you know, the elderly family dog that's on its last legs just looking at you with roomy eyes, like, and you're just like,
no, I can't deal.
Because like anybody who's ever if you've ever seen an old dog, you know exactly what's being evoked there, and it's so just like, pulling my heartstrings.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting as well because, like, so this is one of the places where I have a little bit of beef with Garth Nix. I have a little bit. I'm a vegetarian, but so I kind of dislike the sort of, but I think it kind of ties a little bit back to the bloodlines thing. I dislike the fact that the dog is like, you know, you don't need me, you've got your real family.
No, you are her real family.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, and you know, and I'll bring Nick back for you so you can have a nice boyfriend and all of this, and then just nopes out, and I'm like,
the dog.
I don't like that.
That
No.
could
I
have
don't
been
like
framed
that.
better. Like, I get that it's kind of like, this era of your life has closed, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
always be with you in some way. And like, it's kind of like just death in general, right?
Yeah. And I tell you, and like, there's bits of it that I like. Like, I like the poetic of,
The soapstone dog.
yes! And like, once Kibeth sort of comes out, I guess, once Dog reveals her identity, there's this moment where Lirael's kind of looking at her and being like, we're never going to be the same now I know this. Like, I kind of suspected, but it's different to know that, like, one of the 9 Bright Shiners is my friend, and that's
You've got
gonna,
no plausible deniability anymore.
like, our dynamic is forever altered by this revelation. From a kind of narrative, sort of closure perspective, the like, oh, she dies immediately afterwards and then they can't see each other anymore. It's like, okay, so we never have to deal with that. We're kind of like, that's resolved now because you're never going to have to kind of renegotiate that relationship. And I think that does kind of work. That does work. I think that's pretty well constructed. But it still kind of makes me mad. It still kind of makes me mad.
Yeah, so I haven't read Golden Hand, which is, so this is a trilogy. Okay, but where I'm going with this is a trilogy. There's also, after this, there's Clariel, which I would like to do for this podcast. Because I think it's like it's really, really cool. And then there's also Golden Hand, which focuses on Lirael and I think Nick after the events of Abhorsen. And I would be interested to know if what Lirael's relationship to using the bell Kibeth is going forward. Because that's, I think, a place for that, like, not tension, but that unresolved issues to be
And it's
explored.
kind of interesting as well, because that's another one of the ways we get a kind of hint about who the dog is
that she feels familiar.
Yeah, like Kibeth jumps to her hand more often than any other bell. And like Sabriel, pretty much, when we meet her, she pretty much always goes for Saraneth. Like, she's very methodical, and she will use other bells, but like, the way she always works is, I start with Saraneth, and then I pick another bell. And with Lirael, like, sometimes she does that, but most often, Kibeth is the one that jumps to her hand, which I really vibe with. Like, I don't actually want to change anything about the ending. I think the ending's very good. It's just that there's a little bit of, like, queer discomfort in me that it feels like it's kind of writing. Like, she doesn't know these people. Like, she's hung out with Sam a lot, and I think, like, they're going to be really welcoming.
But Dog is her family.
And, like, again, I feel like it sort of... I don't know that it devalues what she's done, but I mean, I was listening to the Lirael episode, and I think I went on a rant about it then, but like, she made this, you know, everything cool that she is, she made it by the skin of her teeth. She put the work and she made herself her own friend. She made herself become one of the best charter mages in the Glacier.
She learned to use, like, charter skins and stuff.
Yeah, and taught herself.
And, like, Dog is the only one who's been with her through that, all of that, right? Like, Dog is the one who was there when she was suicidal.
Yeah, and like, for the end to be like, oh, it's okay, you don't need... I mean, I guess you could argue it's kind of a metaphor for, like...
It makes sense, but it also doesn't.
You know, like, you need a coping strategy for so long, and then you grow, and it's time to, like, try new things. Like, I'm not necessarily against that. But I feel like the times that works best is when, like, you know, we actually see them outgrow the coping... or, like, the coping mechanism, a relationship with another person whom you could still be friends with. But, like,
Yeah. What do you think, like, struck you the most on the reread or your perspective changing from when you first read this? I think for me, just going, why the hell did I read this at 11? was my main takeaway. But at the same time, like, I think we mentioned this about Sabriel. Like I read Sabriel in primary school, so I must have been about 8, and a lot of it went over my head, to be honest. But at the same time, like, you can't just sort of... I think it's a great young adult book series for, you know, like, preteens to discuss some of these topics about death, about what happens, and it's kind of... I don't know, like, I think now coming to it with, like, a late 20s mindset, it's interesting to sort of go, well, should I, like, as a late 20s, I go, you know, a preteen shouldn't read this. They're too young. You know, shield the children. But then I'm thinking, but I read it.
And it changed my life. It's one of the most influential books, like Lirael in particular.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't take that away from...
Yeah, I have 2 things to say on this. One is that, so in this book in particular, they are staring down the barrels of the end of the world, like just full on apocalypse. Nothing will ever be the same, and everybody will be dead probably. And the whole feeling that I think stood out to me more on this read than it has previously of like, well, nothing's off the table then. There's nothing you wouldn't do. You know, your career, whatever, like, you know, relationships that you have, there is absolutely, like, there is only one goal now. So, like, there's, I think, a general, or there's somebody in the war guard who is like, well, I can't do that. No, damn it, of course I can. It's the end of the world. There are no rules.
He's like, they'll court-martial me, but only if we succeed.
And, like, I'm sort of like, well, I kind of recognise that in the sense of, like, becoming aware of things that are going on in our world and, like, climate change and various different awfulnesses that are going on in the world. So that's something that I think both age and the times that we live in has enabled me to, like, recognise more and feel the impact of it. And I guess the other is, like, this year I turned 28, and 10 years ago, I remember particularly my 18th birthday was one of the most miserable days of my life. Like I very much recognise where Lirael is at the beginning of Lirael. And so seeing, her character arc, for her to build herself up and find a place in the world and find things that she's good at and that make her life worth living, that resonated with me a lot now as I realise I'm coming up on this sort of, like a milestone of like 10 years since that. So those are things that I couldn't have had before, and I did this time reading it. Yeah.
What do you think our darling cat Dothmog would give this book? Is she with either of you?
No, she's not. My door is shut.
Is she having
it's very
snooze?
sad.
So is mine. I think she's on the top of the cat tree.
I have a very strong opinion on this, and this is that this is the first book we've had, not only with a cat, but the cat actually saves the world. The cat is plot essential. I think this has to be a 10 out of 10.
And not only the cat is plot essential, but the cat's catness is plot essential.
Yes. Yes.
The fact that he is a cat.
Yeah. And there is backstabbing. There is eating of sardines, and
it's like discomforting people who aren't cat people by suddenly talking. Just like
yes. I also like that, like, so Mogget is mostly a cat, but sometimes he's also a horrible little homunculus, and I love that for him. You know.
Also, can we talk about the moment of the, like, Lirael's like help him I think it's Lirael, like, just yells at him to, like, help him whatever way he can, and he just goes, whatever way I can.
It's like, interesting. You really want to give me that blank check, do you?
Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure?
Yeah. And that's another way that I think that they are like trying to develop that relationship, is there's multiple times where Lirael and Sam in this book give him carte blanche to, like,
and he actually does then act in good faith.
Yeah. And it isn't what any of them would have thought to do, but, like, it does, you know, it's definitely helping.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm with you on this, I think that this should be a solid 10.
I think it definitely should be a 10. I can't remember what we gave. I need to go and re-listen to Lirael and Sabriel, but I'm pretty sure they were high up.
They were pretty high, yeah.
I feel like maybe the only other 10 we've done has been Temeraire, but this is also worthy. Like, I would,
I feel it's definitely on par. Definitely 10 out of 10, hands down. What other? I say literature-based books. That is what a book is. God.
I only read trash, I'll have you know.
Consumer or books or literature-based content have you guys been consuming?
We started watching Lord of the Rings in our household again. We're doing it by disc by disc rather than movie by movie.
A single disc of an extended edition,
Oh,
yeah. And we've got a really, really big screen, so that makes it particularly like a particular treat to watch.
Yeah.
I've reread so many books because of the damn tree.
So context, Lottie's internet was
destroyed by a tree
Storm
due
Eunice.
to the storm.
Yeah.
So
Storm Eunice it good.
We hate it.
Yeah.
And then BT took ages to fix it, and it did mean I ended up having to read. I read two books. I reread The Alloy of Law, which is Mistborn era 2 set in.
I was going to say that sounds like a Mistborn.
Industrial. It's industrial era, so it's like Mistborn plus guns plus like Sherlock Holmes, and I really enjoyed it on the reread, and I kind of want to recommend it to the podcast because I don't think you need to have read all of Mistborn trilogy to like there's Easter eggs you'd not recognise, but the basic plot is there. You get that.
And like, I mean, from what Lottie was live texting me this reread, and from what you were saying, I think it's like it would be a good fit because it's like it doesn't have the problem I've had with some of our Brandison books where it's just there's just so much of it that it's really hard for, even when I enjoy it, it's quite hard for me to psych myself up for it. But it sounds like it's quite fast paced and like quite tight.
Yeah, it's a shorter book. He wrote it between 12 and 13 of Wheel of Time, one of the two, like clear his head, and it was like, oh, this is just another era. And I reread Skyward, which is the first of his like science fiction trilogy.
Oh, nice.
Which is also enjoyable because just reading that by like I had a little tent lamp still going on. But I think it's like the most books I've read. I literally read a book a day. I was oh my god, I'm reading so many books. Nice. But yeah, it was a good time. And I tell you what, I am very much looking forward to our next book because
Study in Scarlet, baby.
Yes, A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Oh, I'm going to rewatch the Jeremy Brett version of it because I want to have something to compare to. Obviously, it was the first episode of the BBC Abomination.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to compare it to Jeremy Brett, darling of my heart.
Yeah, I'm gonna reread it and then rewatch it.
Yeah.
I'm very, very much looking forward to. I'm listening to an audiobook, and it is. Who am I listening? I'm listening to Derek Jacobi read it on
amazing.
on audiobook, and it's a good time.
I have mixed feelings about Derek Jacobi because on the one hand, I think he's a really great actor, and he's a great choice for an audiobook. On the other hand, he is anti-Stratfordian, which means I'm honor bound to duel him if I ever meet him.
Oh right. Yeah, it's on site.
But there's just little things, just little things. This is not an anti-Stratfordian safe podcast. Just letting you guys know now.
You're legally not allowed to listen to this.
Fuck out of here with that.
Yeah, I have not been reading much stuff, but I have been listening to a lot of, I've been listening to it since like Christmas. Well, There's Your Problem podcast, which is a podcast about engineering disasters, and it's very, very funny. All three of the hosts are extremely funny people. So I've been learning about like a lot of railway history, basically. But it is extremely interesting.
I made a notebook. That was where I haven't really been reading that much. I made a notebook from scratch, like some kind of badass. It's really cool. I had such a good time. I'll link the video I used, the tutorial I used, because it was so much simpler than I was expecting. And like I only had to buy like new glue, I think, and like it is pretty much just stuff you have lying around. Like the spine cloth is like from some old jeans that I've been tearing up, and the inner spine is like dishcloth, and I've used old wrapping paper around like Amazon packaging for the covers and all of this. And it's so cool, my guys. It's so cool. I'm very excited.
Build your own books, but yeah, thank you all so much for listening. Remember to follow us on your podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a review. It does make our hearts swell with joy. Or you can email us. All the links are down below. And follow us on all the different social medias. Also all linked down below. But yes, say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we'll see you next time. Bye!